My name is Daniel. I'm 37 years old, and this is not how I ever imagined my life would turn out. If you looked at us from the outside just a couple years ago, you'd have thought we were the perfect American couple. Suburban home, two-car garage, vacations to Florida every summer, family barbecues on weekends, a dog that barked too much, and most of all, a marriage that looked solid to anyone who wasn't living inside it. My wife's name is Olivia. We met in college. She was everything I wasn't: outgoing, ambitious, beautiful in a way that made you nervous to approach her. But for some reason, she chose me, a shy engineering student who always had his nose buried in books. And for years, I honestly believed I was the luckiest man alive. We built a life together. Careers took off. I got my promotion at the aerospace firm. She started her event planning company and quickly became one of the most sought-after coordinators in our city. We bought our first house, then our second. We tried for kids, but it never happened. That was always a sore spot, but we learned to accept it. Or at least I thought we did. Looking back, I can see now where the cracks started. Small at first, easy to ignore. She worked late. A lot. At first, I believed her. Her business was booming, and big events required late nights. But then there were the unexplained weekend meetings. The client trips that didn't match up with her calendar. The sudden phone call she'd take in another room. I confronted her gently at first. "Liv, is everything okay?" She always smiled, almost too quickly. "Of course, honey. Just stressed. You know how demanding some of these brides are." And like a fool, I nodded. I trusted her. But there were moments I couldn't explain away. Like the night she came home at 2 a.m., smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. Or the time she left her phone unlocked on the counter and a text popped up from someone saved as T. T. Last night was perfect. Same time next week. I felt something cold ripple through my chest. But when I picked up the phone, the message had been deleted. She must have seen me walking in. She was always careful. Instead of accusing her, I convinced myself I must have misread it. But doubt crept in like water through a cracked dam. One evening, after another one of her late meetings, I sat in the living room waiting for her. I had made up my mind that tonight I would finally ask her directly. When she walked in, she barely looked at me. She tossed her purse on the chair and mumbled something about being tired. I said it simply. "Olivia, are you seeing someone else?" Her face froze for a moment. That hesitation said everything. But then she smiled, a cold, rehearsed smile. "Daniel, don't be ridiculous." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But the seed was planted, and it kept growing. Weeks passed. Her distance grew. Our conversations shrank to logistics, bills, groceries, the occasional family gathering. Intimacy? Gone. We were living like roommates. Then one night, everything shattered. I came home early from work. I wasn't supposed to. The office fire alarm had triggered a false evacuation, so I just drove home instead of waiting around. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar black BMW parked down the street. My stomach tightened, but I told myself not to jump to conclusions. When I walked inside, the house was too quiet. Olivia's voice floated softly from the upstairs bedroom, but not alone. There was a man's voice too. Low, intimate. I stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. And then I heard it, her soft laugh. That same laugh she once reserved for me. I wanted to storm up there, to catch them, to demand answers. But something inside me whispered, "Not like this." I walked out, quietly, calmly, and I drove away. That night, I slept in my car. The next morning, she texted me. "Hey babe, hope work wasn't too crazy. I stayed at mom's last night. See you tonight." The lies rolled off her tongue so easily, as if nothing happened, as if I was blind. But I wasn't anymore. From that moment, I started my own investigation. I didn't confront her again. Not yet. I needed proof. Undeniable proof. I owed myself that much. And what I uncovered over the next few weeks would not only destroy everything I believed about my marriage, but change the course of my entire life. The hardest part wasn't knowing she was lying. The hardest part was pretending I didn't know. In the weeks that followed, I became someone I never thought I'd be. Quiet, calculating, watching her every move, gathering pieces. Her routine stayed consistent, or so she thought. I noticed how she always left the house every Wednesday and Friday evening, claiming it was a huge client, very picky. And yet, her makeup was heavier on those nights. The perfume stronger. A particular dress she wore again and again, one she hadn't worn for me in years. I hired a private investigator. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, but I was done walking around blind. The investigator, Jim, was methodical, professional. After just 1 week, he called me. His voice was flat, almost clinical. "Daniel, I have the evidence. You may want to sit down before I send these." The photos arrived by email. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. There she was, Olivia, my wife, wrapped in the arms of another man outside a downtown hotel, kissing him like I never existed. The timestamps didn't lie. The dates matched every one of her client meetings. And the man? A name I recognized, Thomas Grant, a wealthy developer in the city. One of her biggest clients. Divorced, no kids, and clearly no shame. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. Not just because she cheated, but because of how ordinary it seemed. As if I was never even a thought. I didn't confront her immediately. I needed to understand why. I needed to know how much of my marriage had been a lie. That weekend, I visited her mother under the pretense of dropping off some garden supplies. Olivia wasn't there. Her mom, Evelyn, adored me. She always had. As we sat on the porch, sipping lemonade, she smiled kindly. "You know, Daniel, I'm so happy Liv has you. I worry sometimes that she works herself too hard, but you've always been her anchor." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Has she seemed different to you lately?" Evelyn paused, furrowing her brow. "She's stressed, I suppose, but no more than usual. She's always been ambitious, always chasing bigger things. But you know how that is." I nodded slowly, realizing how deeply Olivia had buried her secrets, even from her own mother. Before I left, Evelyn said something that stayed with me. "Daniel, don't let the career stuff come between you two. At the end of the day, love is all that matters." I drove home with those words rattling in my head. Love is all that matters. But was it? Did she love me? Had she ever? Or was I just a placeholder until something better came along? That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling the same question. What had changed? And then, as if fate intervened, I found something I wasn't supposed to. While Olivia was asleep, her phone buzzed. A message from Thomas. "Thomas, I spoke to my lawyer. Just say the word. We'll make this official. He'll be fine. He's too soft to fight back." I read the message 3 times. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning to divorce me. Strategically, carefully, as if I was some obstacle to clear. I felt a cold anger rise inside me. Not rage, not even hatred, just a terrifying clarity. For 12 years, I had built my life around this woman. And now, she was ready to toss it all aside for him. But I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken. The next day, I quietly met with a lawyer. Ms. Hartman was sharp, experienced. She listened patiently as I laid everything out. "Mr. Blake, I strongly recommend you prepare financially before she files," she advised. "Move assets legally. Protect your savings. If she's planning a clean break, she's likely been advised to come after as much as possible." Her words were clinical, cold, but necessary. I took her advice seriously. Over the following month, I reorganized accounts, moved certain assets, ensured my pension was locked in. All perfectly legal, all documented. I even set up a separate living arrangement, an apartment downtown under my name alone, prepared for the moment when everything would come crashing down. And then it did. On a calm Thursday morning, Olivia sat across from me at the breakfast table. She was calm, too calm. Her tone was gentle, rehearsed. "Daniel, we need to talk." I said nothing, letting her speak. "I've been thinking a lot about where we're headed, about our future." She reached across, touching my hand like a stranger playing a role. "We've grown apart. You know that. It's no one's fault. These things happen." I stared at her, saying nothing. "I think it's best if we separate. I've already spoken with a lawyer. We can handle this like adults." I studied her face. There wasn't a flicker of guilt, just calculated distance. "Is this about Thomas?" I finally asked. For a split second, her eyes widened, but she quickly composed herself. Daniel, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I stood up, pushing the chair back softly. Harder? Olivia, you've been planning this for months. I know. I know everything. Her face flushed, the control slipping. Daniel, don't be dramatic. This doesn't have to turn ugly. I let out a quiet breath. My hands were steady. Oh, it won't. Trust me. And with that, I walked away. But deep inside, I knew this was just the beginning. Because sometimes when people think they've won, that's exactly when they start to lose. The house that once felt like home turned into a battlefield of silence. After Olivia dropped the bomb, we barely spoke. We slept in separate rooms, exchanged only necessary words. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontations, just two people living under the same roof, quietly preparing for opposite futures. She believed she had the upper hand. Every move she made was calculated. She still kept up appearances for friends, family, and social media. Photos of us at brunches, perfectly staged smiles, captions full of empty words. She wanted everyone to believe we were simply parting ways as mature adults. No scandal, no pain, no fault. But beneath her careful surface, I saw it, the small signs of nerves. She was waiting for me to snap, to rage, to make mistakes that she could use against me in court. I refused to give her that satisfaction. Meanwhile, my attorney had already filed a full response to her divorce petition. Thanks to the preparation, she was caught off guard when her legal team informed her that most of our joint assets were now properly protected and divided in advance. Suddenly, her financial leverage wasn't as strong as she thought. A week later, her lawyer sent an email requesting a meeting. I agreed. We sat across from each other at a long, polished table, lawyers present. Her attorney spoke first, trying to sound reasonable. Mr. Blake, our goal is an amicable settlement. Olivia is willing to let you keep the house if she retains the business assets, plus spousal support. I calmly responded. I have no interest in her business, but she won't be receiving spousal support. She's fully self-sufficient, and we have evidence of marital misconduct. Olivia's face turned pale. Her lawyer stiffened. I would advise you not to bring up unfounded accusations, her attorney said sharply. I slid a thin file across the table. Inside were copies of the photos Jim had taken. Hotel meetings, public embraces, all time-stamped. The room grew cold. Her lawyer's voice shifted. We weren't aware there was outside counsel involved. My voice remained calm. I wanted to give Olivia a chance to be honest. She declined. Olivia didn't speak. She looked small for the first time in a long time. The meeting ended awkwardly. No agreements. No smiles. That night, Olivia approached me for the first time without her mask of confidence. Daniel, can we talk? Just us. I said nothing but gestured toward the living room. She sat on the edge of the couch, fingers trembling. I never meant for it to turn into this, she whispered. I watched her closely. The cracks were showing. I was lost, she continued. Thomas made me feel alive again. You were always working. We barely connected anymore. I didn't plan to fall for him. I kept my tone steady. So, you thought destroying everything we built was the solution? Tears welled up in her eyes. I was stupid, Daniel. I realize that now. But please, don't humiliate me with the court stuff. We can fix this quietly. I stared at her. This woman I once adored, now desperate. And I said words I never imagined I would say. There's no fixing this. You made your choices. Her tears fell freely now. I never wanted to lose you. I stood up and whispered. You already did. I walked out of the house that night, knowing everything had changed. But the worst was still ahead. Because just as Olivia began to unravel, so did Thomas. And the lies they built together, they were about to collapse in ways none of us expected. The thing about people like Olivia and Thomas is that they never expect consequences. They build their castles on lies, convinced no storm will reach them. But storms always come. A few weeks after our failed settlement meeting, something unexpected happened, something Olivia never saw coming. I received a phone call from Jim, my private investigator. Daniel, I've dug a little deeper into Thomas Grant. He's not as clean as your wife thinks. I sat up straighter. Go on. Jim continued. He's under investigation for financial fraud. Real estate scams, money laundering, the works. Federal agents have been monitoring him for months. His assets are frozen. His legal troubles are about to go public. For the first time in months, I felt something like justice creeping into the cracks. I waited, and then, just days later, the story broke. News headlines everywhere. City developer Thomas Grant under federal investigation. Olivia must have seen it the same moment I did. That evening, she came home looking like a ghost. The confident woman who once smiled through every lie was gone. In her place stood someone drowning. "Daniel," she whispered as she walked into the living room, holding her phone with shaking hands. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know he was involved in any of that. I said nothing. She collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Everything's falling apart. My business, my reputation. The clients are canceling. No one wants to be associated with me now. Her voice cracked under the weight of her own choices. And then came the words I knew were coming. "Daniel, please, maybe we can fix us. I made mistakes. Huge mistakes. But we were good once. I can make it right." I let her words hang in the air. How easily she flipped back now that her safety net had vanished. Now that Thomas wasn't there to catch her. I answered quietly but firmly. "You want to fix things now because you have no one else left." She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "I love you. I never stop." Her words rang hollow. If she loved me, she wouldn't have thrown everything away for cheap promises. "You love the fantasy," I said. "You loved what he offered, but you never thought about what it cost." The following days spiraled even faster than either of us expected. Thomas was arrested. Federal agents seized his properties. Journalists circled like vultures. Olivia's name began appearing in articles as close business associate and companion. Even though she wasn't formally charged, her career was effectively dead overnight. Former clients vanished. Contracts were canceled. Sponsors pulled out. Her once thriving company crumbled within weeks. Olivia was drowning. And now, she finally saw how alone she was. One evening, she knocked on my apartment door. She looked defeated. Not like the woman who once held power over everything. No fancy clothes. No perfect hair. Just broken. "Daniel, I don't have anywhere to go." I stood there in silence for a long moment. "You built that house of cards, Olivia, and now you're standing in the ruins." She looked up at me, her voice trembling. "I deserve that. But please, please don't shut me out. I was stupid. I see that now. Everything I thought I wanted, it was never real. You were. You always were." The pain in her voice was real now, but it was too late for easy forgiveness. Still, I stepped aside, not because I wanted her back, but because part of me, the man I used to be, couldn't watch her spiral into nothing. She spent the night on my couch. Quiet, hollow, lost. I barely slept. My mind spun in circles. Could I ever trust her again? Did she deserve even this much mercy? But little did either of us know, the most shocking blow was still waiting. The apartment was silent that morning. Olivia sat by the window, staring out at nothing, hugging her knees like a child. She hadn't said much since she arrived 2 nights ago. For years, I would have done anything to comfort her. But now, I watched her with a strange distance. The woman who once controlled every room she entered now looked small, fragile. Her phone buzzed. She flinched but didn't pick it up. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Again and again. I asked quietly, "Is it him?" She shook her head without looking at me. "No, the reporters won't stop, and his lawyers keep calling. They think I know things about his accounts, about offshore money." Her voice trembled. "I didn't. I never wanted to be part of any of that. I thought I was special to him." Her voice cracked on those words. For the first time, I saw it clearly. She hadn't just lost money or career. She'd lost her own illusion. I couldn't help but feel bitter. She had gambled with everything we built, hoping for something more, and ended up with nothing. But fate wasn't finished punishing her yet. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. Standing there was a man in a dark suit, holding an envelope. "Olivia Blake?" he asked. She stepped forward slowly. "Yes, you've been subpoenaed." He handed her the papers and left. She stood frozen, reading the document with wide, panicked eyes. "They're calling me to testify against him," she whispered. "They think I knew about his fraud." They're building a case. Her hands shook violently. Daniel, I don't know what to do. I stayed silent. Daniel, they could charge me too. They're saying I may have benefited from some of his illegal deals, that my business might have been funded with dirty money. Now the fear was full in her voice, not just fear of losing me or the career, but something deeper, prison. Her eyes locked on mine. I swear to you, Daniel, I didn't know. I was blind. I wanted the lifestyle. I believed what he told me, but I didn't know. I believed part of that. She hadn't been malicious. She had been reckless, greedy, careless. But sometimes that was enough. The next days became a blur of legal meetings, depositions, and interrogations. She cried often. She barely ate. She clung to me, seeking any comfort I would offer. And as much as my heart had hardened, I still couldn't fully turn away. At one point, her voice cracked in a whisper late at night. You don't have to stay, Daniel. I don't deserve it. I whispered back honestly. I don't know why I'm still here. It was the truth. Part of me stayed because I was still mourning the woman she used to be, the woman I married. Another part stayed out of some dark curiosity to watch the full collapse of what she built. Her world unraveled faster than even I anticipated. Thomas, desperate to cut a deal, threw everyone under the bus, including Olivia. He claimed she was aware of multiple transactions, that some of the business connections were funneled through her name. Whether it was true or not, prosecutors were circling. I watched as Olivia sat in the federal building, answering questions under oath, her voice barely a whisper. Her lawyer advised full cooperation. It was her only chance at avoiding charges. And after hours of grilling, the agents made their offer. Help us fully expose Thomas Grant's network, and we may drop any criminal pursuit against you. It was her final bargaining chip. She agreed. The next several months were grueling. Public trials, news articles. Her name dragged through mud, though she narrowly avoided formal charges in the end. But her life was obliterated. Her business dissolved. Her reputation permanently stained. And through it all, she stayed at my side. Not as my wife, not as my partner, but as a broken woman, haunted by everything she'd lost. One evening, after it all came crashing down, she sat across from me in the dim apartment. Her voice was so soft, I almost didn't hear it. I lost everything, Daniel. I lost you. I lost myself. Histoire de hair. You didn't lose me, I finally said. You threw me away. Her eyes filled again, but she didn't argue. That was the cruelest truth of it all. She had thrown us away long before Thomas was ever in the picture, long before the courts, long before the scandals. And now, there was only one final decision left for me to make. One final reckoning. The weight of everything sat on my chest like an anvil. Months had passed since the trial ended, since Olivia barely escaped criminal charges, since Thomas was sentenced and his empire dismantled publicly. The world had moved on, but we hadn't. We were both living in a strange kind of limbo, sharing a space that was no longer a home. Two people bound together not by love, but by the ruins of what love used to be. And yet, something unexpected happened. Slowly, painfully, Olivia changed. She no longer spoke of business or money or success. She took small jobs, waitressing, temporary office work, anything to keep herself afloat. The woman who once obsessed over status now seemed humbled in a way I never thought possible. She apologized often, not just with words, but with actions. She volunteered at a local shelter. She started therapy. She disconnected entirely from social media. She never once asked me to take her back, but she stayed close, like a shadow that didn't want to overstep. One rainy afternoon, I came home from work to find her sitting quietly at the kitchen table, flipping through an old photo album. Our wedding pictures. When she noticed me, she closed the book and wiped her eyes. I don't deserve your kindness, she whispered. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat down across from her for the first time in weeks. Her voice trembled. Do you hate me, Daniel? It was the question I knew was coming. I took a deep breath. My answer wasn't simple. No, I don't hate you. I hated what you did. I hated who you became. But I don't hate you. She nodded slowly, as if even that small mercy was more than she expected. Then came the real moment I'd avoided for so long. I filed the final divorce papers, I said gently. They'll be processed next week. Her eyes closed tightly. A small sob escaped, but she held herself together. I know, she whispered. It's what I deserve. And in many ways it was. But that wasn't the end. Because even after all the destruction, after all the betrayal, I couldn't ignore what I saw in her now. Real change, real regret, real pain. And somewhere, deep beneath my own anger, a piece of me still saw the woman I fell in love with all those years ago. A few days later, she left the apartment quietly. No drama, no fight. She left behind a handwritten letter. Daniel, you gave me more grace than I ever earned. And even after everything, you allowed me to face my own shame instead of destroying me. You always were the better person. I lost everything because of my own selfishness. But somehow, losing you taught me who I was beneath the lies. I hope one day you find the happiness I once threw away. You deserve it. Always. Olivia. I read the letter again and again that night, and I realized something. Her greatest punishment wasn't losing money or career or public image. It was losing herself. It was waking up every morning knowing she destroyed something pure and having to carry that for the rest of her life. That was a weight no court could assign. Months turned into a year. I focused on my work. I rebuilt my routines. Slowly, the hollow emptiness inside me shrank. And then one random Sunday afternoon, as I sat quietly in a small park reading, I heard a familiar voice. Daniel. I looked up. It was Olivia. But she wasn't the same woman I once knew, or the one who fell apart. She looked at peace, dressed simply, no muck-up, no performance. She smiled softly. I didn't mean to interrupt. I closed my book. It's okay, I said, surprised at my own calm. We talked for nearly an hour. Not about the past, not about the pain, but about simple things. Her new job as a counselor's assistant. My promotion at work. Small, ordinary pieces of life. As we stood to leave, she paused. Thank you, Daniel, for giving me a chance to become better, even if it cost us everything. I nodded, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt free. That was my redemption. Not revenge, not victory. Freedom. Sometimes, the most shocking ending isn't rage. It's peace.